here to answer your questions and respond to some of your concerns. Now, I am here with Dr. Lindsay. Hello.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, you're all bright.
Thank you.
We have missed you.
I have missed you too.
It's good to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And of course, Dr. Rudaini, some would say Dr. K. Hi.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
I am perfect. I'm fantastic. I'm excited about the topic. How have you been?
I've been well. I've been good. Yes, very well. It was Ramadan, but we broke our fast, just on Monday. So we're still celebrating Eid for the next few days. It's usually a 7-day thing. Yeah, but I've been good.
You see, most of us did not know that. We were either there on the D-Day, but now that you have told them, they're probably going to be texting you when to actually show up at your doorstep. It's okay?
Yeah, sure. You're welcome.
And Dr. Jemima, I'm so glad to see you.
Hi, how are you?
I am perfect. You look amazing.
Thank you so much.
A lot of people are waiting to hear more about teenage pregnancies. Most of the time, it's just statistics thrown here, and there. And they make headlines, and then we discuss and call out on the government. But no one really looks at the impact that these teenage pregnancies then have on the mental health of, one, the children, their parents, the surrounding. It's just a whole lot to talk about today. And I want to appreciate you first for making that, making this time to actually discuss the teenage pregnancies or teen pregnancies and the effect on mental health, yeah? So I'm just gonna go straight into it, right? And I'm looking at how would someone determine the effects of school health clubs on female adolescents' reproductive health outcomes. A lot of people just think, well, kuna clubs, join if you want. But how then would somebody therefore get to, determine the effects of these school clubs in regards to what we're talking about today? Lindsay.
All right, thanks for that question. There are normally so many school clubs. There's music club, there's debate club, there's Swahili club, there's all other kinds of clubs, including the Scouts movement. It is a club. And the, what do you call it? Is it the Rangers or the Girl Guides?
Girl Guides.
Is also a club. So, I mean, if we could actually use those clubs to actually talk about life, talk about the realities of life, talk about what's happening to these teenagers, because right now their hormones have peaked. They are literally a ball of sexual energy. They are physically ready to have sex, but are not psychologically ready to have sex. They are not mentally ready to bear the effects of and consequences of having sex.
Yes.
And so these clubs really need to speak and talk about such matters, and especially in the setup of teenage pregnancies. We are seeing so many girls as young as 12, 13, in the age of 2022, still getting pregnant.
Yes.
I mean, this should not be a problem in this in this century. And so I would really, really, really want, if you have a debate club, for example,
yes,
take a topic and go like, are you for it? Are you against it? And whatever comes out of that will definitely be a teaching lesson to whoever is listening. If you are in the Scouts movement, why don't you then do a community project towards advocating against teenage pregnancies and teaching around sexuality, and especially in that sensitive age group?
I like that you're bringing up, the teaching the, sexuality. Did we ever agree as a country, I know this wasn't expected, on the sex education age limit?
Actually,
or is it the approach? Because what you're talking about is really good. We're approaching it differently at their level, using the clubs, which did we ever think of earlier on? And that's why, you're bringing out the essence of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we need to stop hiding our heads in the sand. In this country, Kenya, we behave like ostriches. We are so huge and big, and then we are just hiding our head in the sand, assuming that the rest of our body is not being seen. I mean, it's with us. It's unfortunate. It's with us. It's all over. It's all over. It's in the cartoons. Children as young as 3 years know about gayism and this other queer community. It's everywhere.
Yes.
So we cannot not talk about it. We just need to have age-appropriate sexual education.
And what you have brought in is just use the clubs. Make it a topic of discussion. Let them be part of that discussion through the clubs. Thank you very much, Dr. Lindsay. And I want to hear from Dr. Jemima as well. How can we assess the ability of teenagers, therefore, to be able, parents after hospital discharge? There have been situations where we have sexual abuse, or we have these children, having to deliver, and we want to now incorporate them back. you know, and we want to hear what your perspective would be on this particular approach.
That's quite an interesting question, because assessing requires we actually follow their lives and see how they're doing. These are children.
Yes.
They're children, they're young adults. We call them emancipated teenagers. And with a pregnancy and now a live baby, I actually remember of a girl who delivered after sexual abuse in the hospital we work in. And she stayed with us in the ward for 6 weeks, almost 2 months actually. And initially she was broken. That baby did not survive out of whatever issues. She had first rejected the pregnancy, accepted it, lost the baby. And it took a literal 6 weeks in the ward for us to be able to rehabilitate her back. By the time we were done, or the social workers were done, she was helping out in things in the ward and etc. A teenage pregnancy is, in many ways, it's a life-changing a life-changing moment. In fact, pregnancy is a life-changing moment, and it changes how you think, it changes your dynamics, it changes how life perceives you, how the society perceives you. And many of these children who now have children are lost. If they were informed to, they stopped going to school. If they were having people who are sponsoring them, they now look like a failure. And yet, as a system, we didn't train them or teach them that once you have your periods, that now you can easily get pregnant. We didn't protect them from sexual abuse. Okay, and I think it's very important for us to train, as Ida is saying, Lindsay, as Lindsay is saying, to train them, to guide them before it happens, because prevention is cure. But once it does happen, we need to then pick them up. There are very many things we can do to pick them up, to retrain them in terms of how can you now fend for this child? Who's going to support you to fend for this child? Is the father of this child, adult or young as you are, present? Are your parents present? Is the society taking you back? Are you now a member of the youth or the CWA? You know, the things we need to consider. But as a church, there's a responsibility to rehabilitate these children. As a society, there's a responsibility for us to remember their mothers who are still requiring to go to school so that they can still come back and do other things. So it's a catch-22 where there's an individual responsibility, a parental responsibility, or that can be a guardian, and then a community responsibility to that we have them back in society as they should be.
And I like that you touched on the life-changing moment where some actually drop out of school. And that brings me to a question where I'd love to hear from Dr. Rudaini. And we're looking at then, you know, what's the association of teenage pregnancy and school dropouts, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa. And I'm looking especially in the context of their mental health, because she's mentioned this, you know, it disrupts even, you know, their school-going activities. Yes.
Definitely, yes. Thank you for that question. It's actually quite really sad that we notice 80% of all the teenage pregnancies, the teenagers that drop school is because of teenage pregnancy. And this is also due to lack of awareness, because if they're aware that there is a health policy, there's actually national school health policy that encourages these teenagers to continue school while being pregnant. But most of them usually fear. They don't want to go back to school because of stigma. They will get stigmatized and discriminated, and they'll be seen as those who did not follow what they were being taught. So this program actually is really helpful for them, because if they go on with school, they will not lose the years that they're going to be in school. The years lived with disability will actually be less, because this actually accounts to the YLD, So, and also because there's another mouth to feed, another baby to clothe, and poverty is actually high in especially these regions. And you will realize that most of the teenagers who become pregnant is because of poverty. It's not because of illiteracy, because you will see the prevalence is high in Kilifi County, in Homa Bay. It's the poverty that makes them go out, to reach out to these sponsors or whoever. And since they've not been taught on contraception, they will get pregnant. So they will drop out of school. for that. And they're not aware of the education policy, which is free secondary education policy. Yeah, they will go back to school and leave the children at home, maybe with someone who can take good care of them.
There's always a caregiver.
Yes, like in Kilifi County, at least they came up with a school. It's in Ganda.
Oh,
Yes, yeah. So these mothers can go back to school and pursue their education. Yeah, and it's free of charge. It's a free education policy, free secondary education policy. So it's good for them.
Dr. K, I think that's a really positive development you're sharing. However, we're talking about these girls being aware, and I feel like I want to, before I move to Dr. Lindsay, talk about if they parents. Are their parents aware of this policy? Because sometimes we talk about the child might demand and say, this is what the policy says, but the parent says, well, I don't think that's a good idea. Are parents aware? And then I'm going to come into Dr. Lindsay.
Okay. I don't think the parents are aware, because you might realize that statistics had shown that these teenagers who get pregnant, the higher odds of their parents being pregnant at teenage years is very high. Yeah, so they don't know themselves and they don't know how to educate their children, because they assume that my child is going to school, she will be taught on contraception and everything in school. Yeah, she does not expose the child to sexual reproductive health. So once the child gets pregnant, she does not know about any health policy in the country. Yeah.
And I think this is quite awakening. I hope you're watching from back at home, wherever it is you're watching us from internationally. We're also live on Facebook. Let me know in the comment section what your recommendations would be, and if we really have conversations enough around teen pregnancies and the effect they then have on mental health. Remember, May is also a mental health awareness month, so don't be left behind, especially for this young generation that we're speaking about. And also May 8th is Mother's Day, so we're also honoring the young mothers who are teens early enough. And Dr. Lindsay, we've talked about, them having sponsors, poverty pushing them. And someone has always asked, then who is siring? These children, yeah? And I want to ask then Dr. Lindsay, how does the teenage, boy, masculine discourse, therefore, contribute as a determinant of teenage pregnancy? I'd love to hear from you.
All right, so that is a double-edged sword, because on one end, it is masculine and macho to actually be fertile.
Okay.
And on the other end, the young boy is actually left out of the entire discussion. Like, we are talking about the teenage girls because they're the ones getting pregnant. And we have absolutely not included the teenage boy, who is sometimes the impregnator. So this is a double-edged sword, because on one end, there are communities where they're actually celebrated for getting children at an earlier age.
Oh, yes?
But on this,
culture?
Yes, culture. But on this other end as well, we have these teenage boys who, for your information, on their free time are not discussing about pregnancy. They're not discussing about sex or whatever. They're discussing about cars. They're discussing about racing. They are doing their own play thing and whatever they do as boys, boys being boys. And so that means we need to really bring on board the teenage boys to this conversation. Okay. This needs to be all-inclusive, because we have the one who gets pregnant, who's a teenage girl,
yes,
but we also have the teenage boy who is promiscuous, quote-unquote careless, because they may not even know the safe way of having sex, barrier methods, abstinence, sex education. So, I mean, there's really a discourse there, because we really need to bring them in, and it has to be an all-inclusive conversation, inclusive of the teenage boy.
I appreciate that, you have touched on that. And I once had a conversation on gender, the gender debate that has been ongoing for the longest time. And I remember asking the men on set about having this kind of conversations. And the man on set said, it is embarrassing. He used the word embarrassing. So I am seated here listening to you, Daktaris, and I'm asking myself, she's talking about including the teenage boys, but even the adult men to start with. Are they willing to sit on this table to reason together? You want to add something, Dr. Jemima?
Yes, I'd like to add on to that, because I can't stress about how prevention is cure.
All right.
Adolescent sexual health reproduction talks are a must if you're going to do anything about this pandemic. Let me call it a pandemic.
Yes.
Because as she rightly says, the teenage boy needs to be part of the discussion. The teenage girl needs to be part of the. In fact, the school curricula needs to have something on sexual sexual health talks.
Okay.
Going from orientation, because that's now something they come out of college and they find that they're lesbians and gays, and now they identify because they see some few factors. We need to discuss about what is sex. Is it a good, is it a bad thing? Is it beyond reproduction? What else does it do? Like, we actually need to involve these children, and as she rightly says, it needs to be well packaged so that it's age appropriate. And right from when the baby is small, we tell them, don't show your private parts to anyone. And then they get married and you tell them, show your private parts to someone. So there's that disconnect. There needs to be discussed that it is good in the appropriate place. It needs to be said that at this stage you are developing, you need to grow mentally, you need to be psychologically, financially, and all these things able so that you do that.
Yes.
We need to be able to discuss family planning in adolescents.
Contraceptives?
Yes,
yes.
Contraceptives. They are having sex, unfortunately. That we go for talks where we are talking about menstrual health, and you ask for questions, and they ask you, can I get a coil? And this is a 12-year-old. And you're like, okay, where do I start? But if we can comfortably discuss, yes, these are family planning methods, this may not be safe for you. Condoms are readily available, they're for free in a public hospital. They will not prevent HIV unless there are certain methods. We need to be able to have this discussion so that they make mentally aware decisions.
Right.
And even when they do get pregnant, we need to tell them, please go back home and see. So that they're not hiding and trying to put hangers and all these things to try and, have an abortion or procure an abortion that is unsafe. We're losing so many children because of that. So we need to have open communication, and that way we can save our children.
Open communication standing out for me from what Dr. Jemima has said. And this really is a pandemic. When she said, let me use that word, I would declare that, something that does need the national, attention. And I want to hear from Dr. Udeni. She has emphasized, you all have emphasized the need of prevention. We're talking about, teen pregnancies, that those who have already crossed over to the other side, but what if we can, prevent some more, yeah? And I want to hear from Dr. Udeni, who I want to ask, how successful is abstinence only, devoid of other contraceptive plans, which she has mentioned, in the sex education curriculum, in reduction of the teen pregnancies, abstinence? As it is. People say, well, we're active, this is difficult, I cannot control myself. But perhaps create a new picture for us.
To be honest, abstinence is the safest way of preventing pregnancy, STDs, all the other promiscuity. But that was in 1980s, where programs that advocated for abstinence used to work. Right now, it's actually unethical, because you will advocate for abstinence, but what are these teenagers doing behind the curtains, So as Jemima had elucidated earlier on, you need to teach them how to safely use the contraception, how to safely use the condoms, where else to get these methods. Because if you don't set up areas for adolescent sexual and reproductive health centers, if anything is to happen, they will hide. They will do the clandestine abortions, and which is not right for them. So abstinence right now is not a way of preaching avoidance of pregnancy or STDs and STIs. So it's actually unethical, as they say. The former president of the United States tried, and he actually had a movement, but it did not work. The rates were still high until they introduced such programs of educating teenagers on safe sex and contraception. Then the rates were actually shown to decrease.
I like that you gave us an example there of something that was tried and did not work, and perhaps it's time to change the narrative and the formula, like Dr. Lindsay started by saying, get to their level. Make use of the clubs. And I know we're about to wrap this up, but I want to understand, because this was the heart of this discussion, the magnitude of the psychological effects of teenage pregnancy to their mental health. We might be looking at it as something small, like a dot, but there is quite a magnitude that maybe you can create a picture for us, Dr. Lindsay, and each of you, so that people understand when it comes to health, what magnitude then teenage pregnancy, has psychologically on first, maybe the young children. Each of you could pick something on how you want to comment around it. Karibu.
All right. So the magnitude can not actually be equated because it actually changes the entire trajectory of their entire life. I mean, it is as big as that. Like just one, say what, was it what, 7 minutes? Or maybe it was 3 minutes of pleasure will change the entire trajectory of their life. Let's start with the teenage girl. This girl is 12, now pregnant, has just delivered. Her status has forever changed from a girl to a mother. She's a child by herself. At 12, you are a child. Are you able to actually tend for another child? Let's just pause for that, like that's rhetorical for whoever is watching right now, just to think about that is how big it is. Psychologically, remember, self-image, self-esteem, self-confidence. How does she again get back to the world and go like, okay, here is my baby, I'm also a baby. Okay, do I go to school? Do I drop out? Am I less of a human being now that this has happened? And then remember, there's this societal norm that a pregnancy is stigmatized as compared to an STD, because a pregnancy is outward and an STD is not written on your forehead and it cannot be seen on the outside. But a pregnancy, we are going to see you carrying that bell. We are going to see it. So, I mean, how does she just bounce back from that? Your entire self-esteem is crushed. Self-confidence. You have to, now you're juggling between, am I a teenager or am I an adult? What do I want to do with my life? So many questions, very little answers.
So many questions, very little answers. I can imagine if you put on that shoe right now, Dr. Jemima, how do you feel? And what would be your remarks on the magnitude? And then then I'll hear from Dr. Rudeni. And then there's one major question that I have to ask before we close. But first, because I saw everyone had some sort of reaction, especially when you were speaking on the magnitude of the psychological effects that teen pregnancies would have.
I was trying to imagine this young girl. After, let's say she's 14 or 12, as she said, she has to fend for this child. She's been stigmatized at home. She's been told, you stay home and you breastfeed your baby. So you chose this baby. You breastfeed. This is a result of your decision. After she breastfeeds, it's 9 months. She needs to either go back to work.
Yes.
That's what we would do. Or try and fend for this child. What work does she do? She's a minor. Does she become a house help? As in, what other work is going to employ this girl? I look at the teenage boy, told, okay, you have brought a girl who's pregnant. Hire, now go and fend for this child. What kind of jobs are they going to do? Mentally, they face the being shunned and shamed by their own family, let alone the community. Because the family feels like they failed, so they project that to the children. And it's such a shape-shifting time for this mother, for this father. And when you listen to stories even of people who've made it in life, Sarah Jakes Roberts is an amazing example. She got pregnant at 13. And it changed her whole life. In fact, her own father says, admittedly, she was a black sheep. I didn't see any hope in her. And just because of a teenage pregnancy. And she had the covering of a spiritual father, and she could go back to school and all that. What of those who come from poor families? And those are the ones who are preyed upon. So that by the time, if they go back to the streets, to their sponsors and what have you, they're going to get pregnant again. By the time this girl is 18, she has 3 children or 4, and HIV or something else. So it really just condemns them, and they see themselves as nothing else other than a tool to be used for their body, so it's really just sad.
And we're just creating this picture, even as we honor and respect the young teen moms who are already moms. But of course, I want to hear from Dr. Rudeni. My director tells me I have about a minute. yes. Okay. So I will request to, if she allows, for Dr. Rudeni, and there's this one other question that I've seen asked on our social media that I might also want to ask.
Okay.
Yes.
So these teenagers, they're still very young. I'm sure most of them don't know the menstrual cycle. So they don't know when is safe and when is not safe to have the intercourse. So they're like, I just had sex once and I might not get pregnant. So once they do get pregnant, what hits them is the anxiety. What do I do? I'm already pregnant. So anxiety, then later they plunge into depression. So depression is now, they will do the unsafe abortion. Yeah, so anxiety and depression are the major mental health problems that encounter the young teenagers.
And they actually get into panic. That's why they get into the abortion. And of course, Dr. Jemima said it is that dilemma, of what my life is really changing, like Dr. Lindsay also said. And I know you want to add something, but you could combine it with this particular question, where teenagers often say, I have been told that there is nothing fun about having sex while you are still in high school. You might want to, make a comment on that, even as you add to the point. Yeah.
All right, so I actually wanted to read from a teenage mom.
Okay.
I'm in a group where they actually talked about their story. So this is actually a teenage mom saying this.
Okay.
She says that teenage pregnancy is actually becoming a national threat. When she got pregnant, she then learned the meaning of fear, hopelessness, disillusionment, anger, guilt, and unprecedented joy all at once. She goes on to say, no girl deserves to go through this in their lifetime. And she says, because girls don't know the struggles of the boy responsible for the pregnancy, but they understand the pain that they go through. It was a very emotional time, and I cannot believe that I came out of that alive. So just to add on to what they were saying, those are actually the words of someone who was a teenage mom. So then to add on to what you asked about teenagers saying that they think that it is not as much fun, anything to do with sexual education, always start from the outside in.
Yes, as we wrap up, yes.
Start with asking them, what do you know about it? Do you like it? Have you experienced it? How was it for you? How many times have you done it? What do you think? Never go to a teenager and go like you're talking at them. They will not listen.
I agree.
They will not listen. So just make sure that you're asking them, oh, so you heard about it's not so much fun. Okay, what do you think? Then start the conversation from there.
Thank you. Dr. I wish we had longer time, but of course there's also the scrubs and quotes that will be coming to you at 10 p.m. So those who want to have more discussions will be seeing that once a week. But of course, Health Inside Out will be coming in again on Thursday, 9 to 10. I want to appreciate those online. Before we close, Ishmael Obisa Mapesa saying great. Bill Appetizer saying a pretty informative conversation right there on teenage pregnancies, on mental health. Thank you very much. And like we have said, the world should stop stigmatizing them. We should start having the conversations around it. Normalize, go to their level, use the clubs, use platforms like this. And I like that you young doctors are receptive of these young teenagers, being part of the group as well. And we've heard from the teenage mom that has been who has experienced that. Of course, Dr. Lindsay just read it out, that she does not believe she came out of it. So as I honor Mother's Day this Sunday, this edition, if you're a teen mom watching, on behalf of my panelists, you're beautiful. And if you're still struggling with the healing, you will come out of it. Enjoy the rest of your viewing and programs lined up for you on Lookup TV. Take care of your mental health this month and many other months. We love you, we appreciate you, and happy Mother's Day in advance. And to all the doctors, while I Health Inside Out, I had to say that, hats off. Good morning.